Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to welcome you to the fifth Monitor Side Chat in our series, Tufts Entrepreneurs Tackle Tough Questions. This event is being put on by the Tufts Entrepreneurial Alumni Network, or TEAN, in collaboration with the Tufts Entrepreneurship Center and the Tufts Alumni Office. For those of you who don't know what TEAN is, this group serves as a resource for alumni in the technology and startup spaces, and helps alumni to transition from the corporate world to the technology and startup space, and is also a resource for the university and TEC. I want to start by saying thank you to our extended TEAN and TEC team, Mark Kesson, Iggy Molliver, Brittany Sokoloff, Josh Goldman, Kevin Oye, Josh Kappelman, Amy McDonald, and my former classmate, Luke Frazier, who's helping me with Q&A behind the scenes today. We'll have an open 20-minute period at the end of our session for questions, so please feel free to submit those along the way in the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And we'll do our best to get to all those before we close out for the evening. My name is Shelby Schultz, and I'm an alum from the class of 2012 and a member of the TEAN National Chapter as well as the Austin Alumni Chair. I'm part of TEAN because I'm inspired by the entrepreneurial problem-solving spirit present in Tufts students, and I believe it's important that we continue to foster this spirit and learn from each other. Starting your own venture is no easy task. Those running their own businesses in 2020 have seen a unique set of challenges that we may not see again in our lifetime. I hope the lessons of resiliency that we learn here tonight inspire you in your endeavors. It's my immense pleasure to present Tufts 100K New Venture Competition winners from the last 4 years: ZwitterCo, Potencia, Adelante, and Anodyne Nanotech. Alex, if you want to kick us off.
Excellent. Thank you, Shelby. Hi, everyone. My name is Alex Rappaport. I am the co-founder and CEO of ZwitterCo. We make a novel membrane-based treatment solution that helps industries in the food and beverage, agriculture, and biofuel spaces better manage their water and wastewater. We make it easy for them to remove the contaminants that can lead to discharge problems, make it easier for these industries to recycle and better manage, more sustainably handle their water on site. We actually took technology that was originally invented at Tufts in one of the chemical engineering departments, and over the last 2 years, we've been working to scale that technology from what was a laboratory stage proof of concept all the way to full manufacturing and commercial readiness. And we're in the process right now of working with some of our first industrial clients on field demonstrations. So we are kind of a story of scaling a B2B sales industrial technology, and we are now in the process of kind of making our first commercial efforts and raising the next stage of our fundraising process. That's going to be our big kind of go-to-market thrust. So happy to answer any questions on tough tech and what it's like to scale a business like this. Thanks.
Nice. Potencia?
Hi, I'm Amanda Wang, and I'm the co-founder of Potencia, and here Jun is also the co-founder of Potencia. Potencia is a nonprofit startup that offers accessible, affordable, and effective English classes for adult refugees and immigrants. We start with training college students as our tutors. So 1 in 10 US workers in the US is considered limited in their English skills, and these English learners find current English classes very difficult to access due to fixed schedule, location, or high price. Plus, these learners usually wait for an average of 15 months before enrolling into one free class. So starting from last April, we have been running these small group classes every week. Since COVID-19, we've been running online classes, and now we have over 26 classes every week so far. And we envision to expand to this service to other universities to bring more community engagement. Thank you.
Awesome. Adelante?
Hey guys, Peter Sacco here with Adelante Shoe Company. I'm the founder and CEO and started Adelante several years ago out of a passion for economic development in Latin America, and realized pretty quickly that the real opportunity was to change fundamentally the production side of the footwear business model. So while everybody else outsources production to a factory, which is pretty constraining in the amount of value or the different elements of value that you can provide to the end customer. What we started doing was bringing production in-house. That enables us to make to order. So we deliver handmade, made to order shoes direct to your door in 10 days. Because it is made to order, we can personalize the aesthetic of it. We can do any length or width under the sun. And we can connect you with your craftsman in an experiential way through multimedia. So it's a much more connective and impactful purchase experience and brand experience. And that is what we do.
Awesome. And last but not least, Anodyne Nanotech. I think you guys are muted.
Sorry about that. You said it was going to happen, and it did. So I'm Jake Lombardo, co-founder of Anodyne Nanotech. Konstantinos is joining me tonight. We're working on a novel form of drug delivery, and we can deliver transdermally through the skin clinically meaningful amounts of large molecules really for the first time. So what this means for the patient is painless delivery of drugs that would typically require injections with needles. And for pharmaceutical companies, we can eliminate cold chain distribution, which of course means decreasing costs for them, but more importantly means access to developing markets in countries that might not have access to these medicines currently.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I know that a lot has changed in the world over the last several months, and I've heard some, abridged versions of stories from you guys so far and things that have changed within your business, but would love to hear a little bit about some things that have changed, and then also what are some of those changes that you guys have made that you think will be sticking around even after the pandemic is over?
I can jump in to start on this one. So a lot of times when you're looking at having to do a market shift, you're hoping that it's because a new high value opportunity has appeared in front of you and not because the entire industry that you were focused on simultaneously had to have their production, and also 3 of the top 10 CEOs were involved in a price fixing scheme that is suddenly going to put the entire business into disarray. Welcome to the meat and poultry industry of the United States, ladies and gentlemen. COVID was not kind to them. So back in March, that was really a focus for us, one of the many agricultural industries where we had seen some really exciting value propositions around not only saving water, but saving a lot of the chemicals that plants use. And knowing that, that space is going to be really impaired, not just, in the immediate recovery, but the whole, capitalization of what these companies can afford is going to really be different in the coming years. And, we had, all throughout this process made sure that we always had other industries and other sources of potential commercial opportunities. And knowing that, one market has macro forces that you can't really predict means that you really have to reprioritize and refocus on some of your other opportunities. So in just the last month, actually, we've had our first sale in the enzyme concentration space, and we've got our first on-site pilot demonstration in the bioethanol market. So, always have plans A through Z and really make sure that, you make A happen because your B, C, and D options are so strong that it encourages, A to move quickly, but that if A suddenly drops off the map, that B and C are truly viable options.
That's good advice. Plans A, B, C, and D.
Hey guys. Yeah, I mean, our business, so we're a direct-to-consumer product company. And not just a direct-to-consumer product company, but a direct-to-consumer product company that last year got 42% of its sales out of physical retail locations. And thus far in 2020, that channel is non-existent. So our revenue dropped, intensely, about 50%. We had to lay off about half of our craftsmen down here in Guatemala, which was not fun. And I mean, for us, it was like, nobody's really interested in the middle of a pandemic and a subsequent economic crisis and a $250 pair of shoes that you wear outdoors. So for us, it was about figuring out how to pivot the product, the way that we were positioning the product, and the way that we were selling it in a way that resonated more effectively with like the moment. So we started coming out with like sort of what we call like home products. So like the moccasin, we have a men's and women's moccasin that you can wear around the house now, which has been really popular. And we've launched something called the Pastorius Fund, which I'm actually going to drop a link to in the chat section. And it's essentially an emergency relief program for craftsmen down here in Guatemala that have been laid off as a result of the pandemic. And for every purchase made, we donate a care package of like essential goods to a craftsman or the family member of a craftsman in need down here in Guatemala. And as of this week, we will have delivered over 1,000 care packages. So, you know, and these things are always difficult to talk about because it's like, is it the right thing to do? Absolutely. And is that the reason that we're doing it? Absolutely. And also it looks good for your brand and it is marketable. And, you know, those two things, sometimes it's hard to parse those. But, you know, definitely positioning around mission, around empathy, et cetera. And then the way that we sell, I mean, it's all e-commerce now. We've actually grown our e-commerce sales 3x year over year, comparing January through June of 2019 to January through June of 2020. And Shelby, you asked, you know, what's going to stick around post-crisis. I mean, our objective is to come out of this with a much more robust, you know, better diversified, better developed e-commerce sales engine. So that's it's been very impactful to us, but you know, I'm confident, very confident that we're going to continue to push through and come out the other side much stronger.
Nice. That's awesome. Awesome that you guys are giving back too. I know that's, you know, it makes us all feel optimistic about coming out the other end of this. Amanda and June, I know you guys have kind of an interesting pivot as well due to COVID. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Sure. Hi, everyone. So basically, when we started Potencia, our kind of fundamental direction of the business was running in-person classes, starting from Tufts University and more of more like kind of humane interaction between tutors and learners. But since this pandemic, our initial reaction was that we were doomed in this direction. But we were able to kind of test and validate kind of online setting, and it was more a process of testing out the reaction both from the tutor side and the learner side, how much they are used to this online setting in terms of learning a language, and how much they're equipped and familiarized with the kind of technical issues that are involved in this new setting. So, and kind of we had to kind of pivot to online classes, but still, when the pandemic situation kind of loosens and we go back to in-person class, we hope to keep the operation of online classes to make English classes more accessible.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a tough pivot, but that's really awesome and definitely needed. Jake and Konstantinos, do you guys want to share a kind of an anecdote or a learning from your perspective as well?
Sure. So after hearing those, you know, amazing stories of resilience and kind of overcoming pretty incredible challenges, almost feel guilty of our position that we were kind of going into it, both in terms of timing for us and probably industry. But our challenges were probably more on the minor side of things that almost turned into benefits. So when this first started, we were still acting as visiting scientists in the Tufts lab. that kind of expedited our process and move out, which is now certainly beneficial. So we have our own lab and office space down in South Boston now. Actually made that move during the kind of beginning phases of the pandemic. In pursuing some grant applications for COVID applications, we were connected with some pretty good researchers that, although the grant applications themselves didn't necessarily make it through the weeds of 100 applicants a day, those research collaborations have potential for the future as well. And what else am I missing anything?
And I think for us, the fact that people were really able to understand now that the healthcare system needs new solutions in order to stop being overwhelmed, gave us a much more easily understood value proposition for replacing injections that require healthcare administration.
Nice.
And real quick, one other thing you might notice too that is pretty cool. Some of the new vaccines that could be coming out might be delivered via microneedle. And that's something that we're really excited about. In general, microneedle successes kind of propel our industry forward. So the first one that's out and on the market can only help us.
Awesome. That would be, I think that would be really cool for a lot of people. So hopefully that comes to fruition. I have just kind of a personal question that just popped into my head. So I'm gonna like shift us in direction a little bit, but I think it's especially for people who might be online right now who are interested in starting their own venture. The majority of my career has been at startups as well. And I've seen my fair share of poor leadership strategies and good leadership strategies. And I know each of you kind of have really had to step up in this time and be leaders to either your co-founder or employees if you have them. I'd love to just pick your brains a little bit on what you think either makes a good leader in the stage of business that you're in or in the current global situation that we see ourselves facing today. Peter, I feel like I was going to volunteer you because I know that you've gone through some ups and downs.
I mean, leadership, it's a tough one. I would say from my perspective, so like when things get into crisis mode, I need to work harder to not get in everybody's way, right? So when things get into crisis mode, if you're the founder and the CEO, oftentimes, at least in my experience, you want to jump in, you want to get operational, you want to start making moves and this and that, and this is what we need to do. And I think probably one of the things that I'm best at as an entrepreneur is the ability to build a high quality team. And I think that one of the things that I had to check myself on in, I don't know, March, April, was making sure that I was continuing to step back, not get in the way, and, steer the ship and support people in a number of different ways, appreciating them for who they are as people, appreciating their work-specific outputs, being available and making myself available to help with the things that they're working on, and then nonverbal gestures of appreciation as well are really important. But making sure that I'm stepping back, focusing on those, and understanding that my number one job is to support the team and continue to encourage them, steer the ship, yes, but other than that, support the crew of the ship. And you don't necessarily, if you have a good team, you don't necessarily need to jump down into the weeds and start getting in everybody's way. So that's been sort of my approach, is stay positive and just, I've two jobs. One of them is to guide the vision and the strategy of the company, and the other one is to support our team members and be there for them in such a way that they are successful with their jobs.
That's awesome. It's a lot to take on, but in my viewpoint, very important for scaling businesses. Would love to hear if anybody has anything to add. Would love to hear some more thoughts on that.
Yeah, so on ZwitterCo's front, we are an R&D operation in a lot of our kind of main operational capacity right now. We have a lab, all of our people are engineers, and the vast majority of our resources are poured towards product development. To have a lab that is completely shut down and to have a whole bunch of engineers who want to be running trials that we have no access to do and can't really move any of the core milestones forward. We had to start at the pandemic basically creating 6 or 7 new jobs within the company that just didn't exist before, and then trying to repurpose people who weren't trained for those jobs to try and do them. It was a really fun experience. I actually really almost got closer, I think, to a lot of my team members, particularly the ones on the side of the organization that I don't get to interface as much with. The folks on the technical side really work more on their technical operations and not so much on the commercial and market side. So we converted the whole technical team into a commercial team and tried to figure out what kinds of kind of more macro understandings of the industry could we do that could still make meaningful progress, but that wouldn't just have several months of dead time. So I think on our side, the people management really looked like, how can we make sure that people are still enjoying their community and feeling like they're doing something meaningful? So that was everything from restructuring what work on a day-to-day basis meant, and really restructuring the level of communication between the founders and the rest of the company, constant touch points to know why we were making the decisions we were making and what people's work was going towards. We instituted a lot more virtual and semi-weekly discussion points that were really just about making sure everyone was as up to date on the timelines we could possibly provide, because that transparency made everyone feel like they were all part of it together.
Awesome. That's a lot of change, but it sounds like good change. In that vein, feel free to still answer the leadership question, but are there any kind of big business changes? I think some of you alluded to this a little bit, but big business changes or operating changes or even mentality changes that you'll keep up after this is all over? Potencia, you guys probably have a good answer. Oh, go ahead, Peter.
Well, I don't want to, anybody else can jump in. But one that I didn't touch on, which is very important to us, which I would call a adjustment that we've made over the last few months that will certainly carry forward, is a retooled focus away from growth at all costs and towards profitability in a sustained way. What I like to say is that at Adelante Shoe Company, we are facing 2 crises right now. One of them is COVID, but the other one in our space is like a broader moment of profitability reckoning amongst direct-to-consumer brands. So, the easiest example, I don't know if anybody follows like the D2C space, and you're familiar perhaps with like Casper, who in their last private funding round was valued at over $1 billion, and then they IPO'd in I think early February, and they were valued at 500 million. And it's because nobody really knows if they're ever going to become profitable. And that's just the start. There's a dozen other direct-to-consumer brands that are suffering massively right now, especially within the context of the crisis, because they have not figured out how to acquire customers in a way that makes money for their company. It's the classic like VC trap in the direct-to-consumer space is just grow, and you raise money and you bring on expenses that your revenue and your profit don't support, et cetera. And that's great if you're a tech company, but a lot of direct consumer companies, like building a brand doesn't necessarily scale that way. So we are taking advantage of like the most imminent crisis being COVID, to make adjustments that speak to not just COVID, but this broader crisis that direct consumer brands are facing in general, which is we need to become profitable, and we need to become profitable in a sustained way. And so there's things like we're introducing accessory products and bundling and this and that. But that's how we're thinking about that change sticking around post-COVID.
Cool. That's really interesting. There was a big, if any of you follow Outdoor Voices, which is a D2C brand based in Austin now, there was a similar kind of reckoning around the profitability that happened recently. So I think that's probably a smart thing to be thinking about, because there's definitely a lot of attention on those things.
Yeah, they're one of them, one of those brands that's in rough shape right now as a result of that.
Yeah. A lot of leadership changes there. But Potencia, I think you guys probably have an interesting answer to this question of what changes will you keep implementing post-COVID, since you kind of did a big shift in your business model.
Mm-hmm. So I can answer this question. So basically, as Jun just mentioned earlier, we switched from like purely offline class into model is like more combination of online and offline, which like the offline part will be resumed after the pandemic passed. So I think basically when we transfer from offline to online, there were a lot of changes just regarding the business, like daily operations, like how we run this.
There we go.
So I think it's relatively difficult to educate our learners to use Zoom, because it's brand new for most of the people who are at like our parents' age, and also like many of them might not have access to laptop or PC, so they have to use their like smartphone if they have smartphone. So we have to text them back and forth to like let them know how to use Zoom, how to join the tutors like meeting room kind of things. And also it's very hard to know whether a certain class is well settled, because when we have like offline classes, we were at Tufts, we were on campus, so we can literally see like whether people come to the class and how they are doing in the class. But now we just can't, and we have to wait until like the end of the class, then we can know how the class was conducted and if there were any like urgent things coming up along the way. So I think we changed like during this transition, there were a lot of challenges, but like now we're trying to adapt to this new model and try to bring more like technology into this nonprofit business to empower people. So I think in general, it's still it's a positive change, although it takes a lot of time to adapt to it and to think about like innovative ways to continue the business.
Nice. Hopefully, I mean, since technology is so impactful, hopefully some of these changes will be doubly impactful for the people that are using the technology, which is great. Does anybody else want to share some kind of COVID related changes that will continue forward?
Sure. So for us, it was kind of one of those classic entrepreneurial cliches where that actually came to fruition for us, where, they always tell you to try and raise more money than you think you're going to need. And actually through this, we were going through one of our first priced funding round. So as you can imagine, that experienced some delays going through kind of the recoil of all that process. So having the advantage of, we almost did it by accident, but our first pre-seed round of kind of oversubscribing that a little bit definitely gave us a little extra runway to be comfortable through that, where if we hadn't, we certainly would be in a different position through those negotiations.
Awesome. Yeah, I guess that's probably good advice. Raise more than you need. I know that I think, Alex, you were also raising money, if I remember correctly. I think that there is some appetite from myself and from some of the attendees to know a little bit more about fundraising in this kind of environment. One of the first panels that we had with this group was actually from the VC perspective, and was very interesting. So definitely, I think some of our audience would like to know what that looks like from the other side of the table.
Sure, happy to do so. We first had our down selection from the number of VCs and strategic venture capital arms that we were working with start providing terms in the March timeframe. We were looking for a close prior to the summer. So that process got put on ice, and we're now back in the seat where we've got term sheets. We've soft circled the amount that we're looking for. We're looking for a September close now. One of the things that I wish we had done better as a means to answer this question is decouple the fundraising process from milestones that were drastically impacted by COVID. And to that end, we were hoping that the existence of customers and the kind of internal trials that we'd done in the lab were sufficient to be able to secure the round that we were looking for, and have that round then basically fund the field demonstrations and more of the industrial scale proof. And that didn't exactly work out. That we hadn't, I think, correctly identified in advance what the necessary milestones were going to be that were going to get us over the finish line. So because we hadn't really understood what it was going to take to close, by the time that kind of the COVID shutdowns were happening, we were ready to kind of proceed with the deal, but all the investors were like, we needed to see more on-site development, and we just can't get comfortable with this until you're able to have your activities resume. So we were then in the position of basically waiting for the world to reopen so that we could resume our commercial activities, so that we could then have the investment round close. And there was no clear certainty on where kind of bridge funding was going to come from to support that effort. So I can't really say that there was a good outcome of fundraising during COVID. It was that everyone got very tight with their with their kind of risk allocation, and said, I need to know that you're going to be able to get back on track before we can proceed with fundraising. So the end result is that getting a customer and getting manufacturing readiness was actually the thing that I think will get us across the finish line. I shouldn't say that until we're there, but so it was really it was kind of just a waiting game. It was a waiting game for us to be able to get to a story that felt like the risk threshold had been lowered substantially. The people were confident they were going to put money into a venture that was going to immediately be able to turn that into commercial activity. So I can't stress enough, know your milestones, know the thing that's really going to get people across the finish line. And yeah, hope that your process doesn't have acts of God that make the accomplishment of those milestones suddenly far more challenging.
Definitely exciting. Anyone else have a funding kind of or at least thinking about funding that, and they want to share any anecdotes from that? I know that I work at a startup as well, and I was semi-close to the fundraising process, as close as I've ever been in a startup. And our CEO kind of took the approach of a lot of friends and family outreach to get just kind of a seed series going, which I think for us was really successful during this time. So curious if anybody else has any anecdotes like that they want to share, because I think that's top of mind for a lot of entrepreneurs.
For us, it was kind of more just persistence, I guess, and again, benefiting from the industry and being able to sell that, people are still going to need healthcare, and our development timeline is so far out from actual commercial usage that we're really going to be in the R&D phase throughout this period anyway. So just being able to kind of spin a logical story that makes sense for the investors and kind of calms them down a bit. So we were in a similar position to Alex. We were we said we were going to close the beginning of May. We're looking to close this week, so certainly a delay there. Along the way, we had to even just completely walk away from a deal because our valuation got cut so far down just from skepticism of, the current markets. So back to my previous point of raising more than we thought we needed, if we hadn't done that in the first place, we probably wouldn't have had the confidence to be able to walk away from that deal. Yeah, it was, at the time, it probably seemed a little crazy to be doing that in the middle of a pandemic, but hopefully, knock on wood, it'll work out eventually.
Awesome. Yeah.
And if I can add on that, it's back again to what Alex said at the beginning. You always need to have plan A, B, C, and D, because for us initially, as Jake said, we were in the middle of our fundraising, but all the investors disappeared and most of them froze even the due diligence process. But because we're persistent, we persuaded the first investor to continue the process, and then we end up with far more investors than we ever knew. So it's always good to have multiple plans and multiple investors interested.
Nice. I commend you guys for, I know some semblance of how hard it is, but not the full way through. So it's very impressive. I have one more question to transition us into some audience Q&A. So if anybody attending today wants to put either a question to a specific panelist, you can put that in the Q&A box, or a more general question as well, and we'll get to those. But to transition us, I guess, more into a Tufts lens, how did Tufts prepare you to launch your venture or your Tufts education or network? And then what advice would you impart on another alumni who was looking to start their own venture?
I love to say, Peter, I got you, man.
Oh.
Got you on the jump there. I just always love to say, use the faculty. The faculty are professionals. They're experienced. They've been doing this for decades, and they come to Tufts to enjoy the joy of teaching and to just have a little bit of fun on the side. I mean, they are the experience base and the advisory network and your initial investors. They are all the feedback that you could need to learn why your idea is terrible, but how to make it better, because they all start out terrible and they all get better. But that process requires you to be able to put your ideas in front of really smart, really experienced people. And you've got that network right at your fingertips. So it was the best piece of advice anyone ever gave me was that before the 100K, I needed to have every single ELS professor vet my presentation, and they all did. And it got better and better every time. And then when we ended up moving from the 100K beyond, all of the initial outreach to angel investors, all of the initial, where to my advisory network, who's going to be my board member. It all starts with putting your story in front of people who are going to give you the real serious appraisal it deserves, and won't be shy to tell you the things that you need to hear and what parts of your story still have voids, still feel like they don't make sense, need to have a little bit more elbow grease put into them. So use those faculty, get a cup of coffee, go get lunch, buy them lunch, make their time worthwhile, because it's going to be worth it for you.
Nice.
Yeah, 100%. I would second that all the way. Our first board member was a Tufts professor, Mark Rinaldi. He's no longer there, but board member, investor, still to this date, my closest mentor. Like Alex said, a lot of our initial angel round investors came from the Tufts community, and then the 100K gave us a little cash when we needed it. So. I don't know what I cannot envision having started Adelante successfully outside of that context.
Awesome. That's powerful.
And also always the alumni network, because I want to say that one of our most important advisors, investors, and now board member too, came through an introduction from Alex.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think Tufts is a really, really strong network. That's a very, very personal thing close to me, that I like to support our network and have kind of built out the Austin alumni chapter for that reason, because I think our reach should be, broad. Like where I come from, nobody knows what Tufts is. But like, by fostering this community, this great community that we have, that's going to change. And I've never sent a message to a Tufts alumni that didn't get a response. So I can imagine. Potencia, do you guys have anything to add there? Bit of advice that you would impart?
I think all the points that were raised are definitely effective in terms of approaching to faculty. That has been one of the most helpful kind of part in the development process. Something that we have realized is important would be kind of maintaining relationship with different departments. So like something that, well, at the initial stage of development, we were we didn't feel we were ready to approach them, or we didn't know who to reach out, or whether reaching out to different departments would be effective. But when it comes to kind of sharing the idea to different like more interdisciplinary ways from different departments, I think that's something that we can optimize kind of to get to know more about from different fresh eyes.
Yeah.
So I want to add something real quick. I'm surprised he didn't say it himself, but Konstantinos has a philosophy that I love, to always try and be the dumbest person in the room. And, whether that's literally true or not, I think that's something that's very easy to do using the Tufts network. Whether, it's events like this in TEAN, the 100K that gave us the opportunity to present in New York and San Francisco, things like that. You have access to incredible people that, are experts in their field. And if they're not, they are connected to the people that are. And sometimes those one-off connections are the most valuable that you can have. So I think it's really just taking full use of the resources that are here.
That was very lovely and humble, which I think is a good quality to like keep in your back pocket. We have a question here. How do you deal with doubt and stay motivated in the hardest times? So I'm sure that you guys have a little bit of that brewing right now. What are some things you do to kind of keep that at bay, or at least keep looking forward?
Peter here with Adelante. I mean, I just kind of like check in with myself, and I'm like, is there something else that I would rather be doing? Like even on the hardest days, like, I just love, like, entrepreneurship is one of very few things that I have discovered in life that I am like head over heels, no questions asked, in love with. And that, like, I know I want to be in my life forever. It's beautiful. I just kind of check in with that, and like sometimes it gets really, really tough. But like life is also really good, and I'm doing what I love, and I have a great opportunity, and I don't know, I just kind of chin up.
That is lovely.
I think as an entrepreneur in general, you have to somewhat be inherently optimistic. But aside from that, I think just, if you spend even a month or two through the process, you'll notice that every week, sometimes even every day, is an absolute roller coaster. So pandemic or not, you're going to go through doubts and incredible optimism and all of it pretty much every single day. So you kind of get used to being able to handle those doubts, because right on the other side is something amazing that's going to happen. And you're just one or two steps away from it.
It's a good philosophy. We have an audience question here about advisors. So it sounds like you guys kind of mentioned some mentors and advisors from the faculty if you were to go out, well, this attendee actually said lawyers, question mark. What kind of people should be in your phone book and what advice should you ask of them? That is a great question that I would also love to know the answer to.
Okay, could you just, oh, Jake, were you, Jake?
Yeah, I can add something there. I think it depends on what your company is and what stage you are, but more importantly, who can add value to your company, and depending on what stage that is. So it's going to depend, it's going to be different for everyone, but lawyers, certainly necessary. I'm not sure if that's the best tool to network to people, just because it's not necessarily the most sincere introduction. If you can get a warm intro through someone else, I think that's a lot more valuable and holds a lot more weight. But it certainly, especially, I don't know who's asking the question, but if you're a young entrepreneur, it certainly helps to have some seasoned advisors on your team. Complement your young, energetic entrepreneurism with some gray hair.
I'll add a thought, not necessarily on where I go to find advisors, but what I know it feels like when you get a good one. Because in general, your process is constantly putting your story in front of as many people and getting as many data points as you can. So it's, you should have a constant influx of new people that you're meeting. Take every introduction you can, always be asking whoever you're talking to for the next person that they recommend you talk to. But what it feels like when you have a really helpful advisor is you find yourselves learning just by the process of having a conversation with them. And I loved the comment from Constantino. So, Kevin Oye used to teach us a very similar sentiment. You can't look smart and be learning at the same time. So if you're talking with someone who makes you feel dumb because all of a sudden they're repackaging your ideas in a unique way that makes more sense and you can take and run with, that's a good sign. Someone who's actively listening, engaging with your content, and giving you kind of new knowledge or new ideas to kind of mold into your vision. Two is someone who goes out of their way, almost without necessarily you asking them to help you further where you're going. When someone gets excited by you, gets excited by your story, and all of a sudden, without prompting, they're sending you new connections, or they're emailing you at 3 in the morning saying, I was up at night thinking about this, and here's some idea I have about your business model that you should work on. Those people who just get excited by ideas and people and take the initiative to present value where they can add it, those are people you really want to have on your team. And the third one is just people who can make connections, people who have the industry experience and who on the drop of a hat have the Rolodex that they can draw from for where they would recommend you go next. If you can get all three of those things, connections, immediate eagerness, and they're smarter than you, like latch on to them, collect people with those qualities, because you're always going to need them.
Awesome. Anyone else want to add anything there? We have a couple more audience questions and 10 minutes left. We have a specific question for those of you that were in the MSIM program. So I'll get to that one first in case we butt up against the end. And the last audience question that we have here is more broad. How did you determine what your project was going to be in the MSIM program? And how did you create your group or choose your partner? I see some smiles.
I'll jump in very quickly. The teams are assigned as part of the first semester. You get to choose who you work with in the later semesters. So it's less about being matched with the perfect team and learning how to be an effective team member on a disparate team. That's actually a very crucial part of the experience that I recommend you savor, as unpleasant as it may be at a day-to-day moment, because those difficult conversations never stop being difficult, but they do become more and more important. In terms of how you pick a project, you're given a blank canvas, and then you just have to bash your head into it enough times until suddenly something exciting comes out of it. There is very little guide path here, but it is always worth kind of taking what are your personal interests that if you're working on, you're going to find yourself being motivated and excited to keep going, and what are the macro trends that you're seeing in the industry. Peter mentioned an incredibly valuable insight on how much there's this kind of global shift, particularly in the venture capital community, around profit over growth. I mean, this cannot be overstated, the significance of this. And so looking at business models that are all about hypergrowth at the expense of actually ever reaching a positive bottom line is like, something that would have gotten unnecessarily high valuations a couple of years ago, and that I think is going to be a really dangerous model to pursue going forward. So starting to have some of these kind of anecdotes in your back pocket of knowing, this industry is headed in this direction. There's a lot of venture capital money moving in this direction. There's a lot of, demand from a regulatory perspective that I know is going to start applying to these spaces. If you compare what you care about in life and what you see happening in the world, it'll distill to something interesting.
Good advice.
So our team formation was also assigned in kind of complete luck. We lost a few along the way for a variety of reasons for each one, but Konstantinos and I were from the initial group. In terms of picking the project on top of everything Alex just said, I think the same path that we've both followed here, there's an incredible amount of technologies coming out of Tufts that aren't necessarily viewed by everyone and have a lot of potential there. And I think that, if you're not into hard tech or some kind of science technology, that's all well and good. Potencia is a great example of that. But there certainly are some opportunities there. And I think the Tech Transfer Office is moving in the right direction in terms of making that happen.
Awesome. Konstantinos, anything to add or?
I think in order to choose the right project, it's important to really take the time to see what is around, and there are so many different things that you can work on, and make sure that you choose something that you are really passionate about it and really that you really like it, because you have to spend a lot of time, and maybe start these difficult conversations that Alex mentioned early on when you start choosing projects, because if you are involved in a project that you don't like, then even your growth is going to be affected by that.
Nice. Potencia, do you guys have anything to add here as well?
Yeah, so I agree. I apparently agree with all the previous comments from my classmates and previous MS participants. But I think the most important thing is to figure out the problem that you think is the real problem and you want to solve. So basically the first semester, the group is assigned, and you might dig into certain problems that you are not very interested in, but just take it as an experience. If you are not in that field, you can learn about a totally new field. So I was in a medical track, and I was my major was financial stuff as an undergrad. So when I joined that team, I was those are a couple of terms that I couldn't even understand. I think the most native English speakers won't even understand, because those are medical terms, but I learned so much during that semester. And I also gained good experience with my very smart and kind teammates. So I think that's a good experience for me. And then the second semester I started Potencia together with June and 2 other teammates. So I think the way how we choose each other as our group teammates is that we already figured out that we were all the 4 of us were interested in social impact field through the first semester, because we are all close together, all 30 classmates, and we know each other's interests. So it's pretty natural to talk to each other when we had free time in the first semester, talking about what's your passion, what you really want to do. So we formed the team in the second semester. And just deciding the project, I think it's more doing interviews around the topic that you are interested. So we were social impact. So we want to figure out what are the most urgent problems in this field. And you just keep doing interviews, keep talking to new people, and just believe in like believe in yourself, because sometimes the problem sounds very like ridiculous to other people, but as long as you think that's a real problem that needs to be solved, I guess you can just like keep moving on. Even if there are like a lot of obstacles, it's still gonna be a valid thing.
Beautifully said. We have just a kind of a broad advice question to wrap up on today. And I think, you know, all of you probably have a little bit of insight here. From the audience, what would you recommend, or what kind of advice would you give to somebody who is looking to start a venture during the pandemic? I think there is an argument to be made that during times of crisis, it breeds great innovation. So curious kind of what you guys feel or think about the possibility of someone launching a venture now.
Depends what the venture is, but I would say in my space, which I would broadly characterize as like the direct-to-consumer product space. I mean, like you probably don't want to start it now unless you have like some sort of like really innovative product that speaks super, super well to this moment. But if you don't, like, I would just wait it out, and I would focus on team, unit economics, and how are you going to sell the product? Go-to-market strategy. Those are the three things that you really need to have buttoned up before you jump in.
Awesome. Anyone else? I know some of you guys are in intense R&D, using the time wisely.
I'll echo Peter's sentiments. Don't, but if you can't help but not, and you can sell something during a pandemic, you're gonna have a kick-ass business. There's a kind of well understood notion that if you are, you know, trying to scale during the glory days of a really nice market, you know, you're going to have some fat on the edges that's going to get trimmed off when things have a downturn. But if you can start and thrive in a pandemic, and you can find a need that even amidst tight purses, people are still saying it's important enough for them, they need to have this problem solved, you know, you've got a real problem that you're trying to address. And there's no wrong time to go address a real problem.
Yeah, I was going to be slightly more optimistic there than Alex, but highlight the points that he made, because I think it actually serves as a great opportunity to focus on what really matters in whatever business you're trying to make. And like he said, if you can raise money and do something, you have a very compelling value prop, and it's certainly worth pursuing.
Awesome. Amanda or June, you want to add anything? No pressure on that one. It's a bold question. Awesome. Well, we're right at time. You guys, I can't thank you enough for sharing your stories. I think I learned a lot. I know the attendees learned a lot, and, you know, hopefully this continues to foster this great community that we have. So I'll just end by saying we have another great event coming up on July 27th at 6. We're going to listen to some recent Tufts alumni entrepreneurs talk about what it takes to start your first company, discuss the skills and relationships and tools they needed to successfully build a minimum viable product, acquire early customers, fundraise, and grow. Our panelists will be Charles Cushing from class of 2011, who runs Startups, a knowledge sharing community for operational leaders at the top 500 e-commerce startups. McGill Davis, class of 2015, who is most recently co-founder of HumbleDot, an HR tech platform to automate team management. And Shreya Navatia, who was recently founder and CEO of the Violet Society, which is an accelerator and career development program for female and non-binary founders, product managers, and engineers. So I hope you guys can join us then. That's it. Have a lovely evening.